Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. Each of you makes this channel alive and special. Thanks to your support, I can share stories, thoughts, and emotions that hopefully resonate in your heart. If you have just started exploring my content, welcome. Real-life stories are waiting for you here. Subscribe, like, and share your impressions. Your voice is very important to me. I walked into the hospital, already bracing myself for what I might find. My daughter was supposed to be in the ICU, but before I could even register my surroundings, a nurse grabbed my arm and shuffled me into a small, dim closet. "Shh, just look," she told me softly. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might not hear anything over it. Suddenly, something happened that sent a chill racing down my spine. The piercing ring of the phone shattered the stillness of the night. In my haste, I knocked a glass of water off my nightstand as I reached for the phone. The display showed an unfamiliar number. The thudding in my chest intensified even before I answered. "Mr. Perez," said a woman on the other end, her voice shaky and oddly detached. "This is Phoenix Memorial Hospital. Your daughter was brought in an hour ago. She's in critical condition. You need to come immediately." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I sat up abruptly, the bed sheets winding around my legs. "What happened? What kind of accident?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Car accident? Severe injuries? Please come now." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone. Something didn't sit right about how she spoke, almost like she was reading from a script. But fear quickly smothered any doubt. I threw off the covers and scrambled into the clothes from the day before, my hands clumsy as I buttoned my shirt. Critical condition. The phrase echoed relentlessly in my mind. Outside, the city was quiet, the dawn just beginning. The streetlights cast everything in a muted orange. I rushed to my car and sped onto the empty streets. My jaw was clenched so tightly it ached. It would take 20 minutes to get to the hospital, maybe less if I really pushed it. My hands were slippery with sweat on the wheel, and I ignored the yellow traffic lights. This wasn't yet grief. It was something cutting and raw. After 30 years in the courtroom, I could usually keep calm, but this was about my daughter. When had I last seen her? 3 days ago, she had come down for coffee, quietly asking to borrow money for groceries. $200. Her husband, Luther, didn't even come to ask. I wrote the check, and she took it silently. Before that, it was 18 months ago for 15 grand on a business plan that tanked last year, 8,000 for Luther's medical bills that went nowhere, and a rushed 22 grand investment 6 months back. The thanks always seemed to dwindle fast, replaced by nothing but silent accusations. I snapped back to attention, forcing myself to focus on the road. Central Avenue was eerily quiet, the buildings like silent onlookers. I reached Phoenix Memorial and parked in a couple of spots, tumbling out and rushing inside. The entrance doors seemed to open at a snail's pace. Under the harsh hospital lights, the place felt sterile and unforgiving. At the desk, a nurse was typing away. I kept my voice steady as I said, "My daughter, Mia Perez, she was in a car accident. Critical condition. ICU." The nurse turned to face me, her expression calming. "I'll check," she replied. "When was she brought in?" "About an hour, maybe 90 minutes ago," I replied, glancing nervously at the clock. She checked the computer, then looked back at me, a bit perplexed. "Sir, we have no Mia Perez admitted tonight. No ICU admissions in the past 3 hours." Her words took a moment to hit me. I leaned in, urgency in my voice. "Check the emergency room. Trauma. Someone called me from here." "All right," she nodded, making a quick call. I watched her face tighten with each response she got. Each look she sent my way carried a hint of growing concern. As I stood there, a cold realization began to form. That call kept nagging at me. The voice was tense, but too rehearsed. The call ended too abruptly, leaving me with no chance for questions. The nurse finally hung up and looked me in the eye. Over by the phones, I was trying to get checked in at the hospital. I'd spoken with the ER folks, trauma team, and even the ICU, but not a single one had a patient with the name I needed. No car accidents matched the details I was given either. Those buzzing fluorescent lights were giving me a headache, and somewhere nearby, a monitor kept up with its relentless beeping. The nurse at the desk was young, seemed capable, and was doing her very best to assist me. I could see she was being honest. "Really appreciate it," I told her genuinely. She offered to reach out to other hospitals to be sure, but I declined. I kept my voice steady, though inside, everything was connecting like puzzle pieces. Someone had fed me a lie to get me out here. A person who knew exactly which buttons to push to send me rushing out the door. Someone who was well aware I'd come, regardless of our history. As I made my way to the exit, my mind raced with theories, but something made me pause in the lobby. An instinct, sharpened over years of reading people and weighing the facts. Something wasn't right, but not in the way I first thought. At that moment, a firm hand gripped my forearm. I looked and found a woman in scrubs, older than the receptionist, probably in her mid-40s. Her eyes looked tired, but radiated determination. Her name tag read Vera Turner. Leaning in, she whispered, "Trust me, and just watch." I started to ask who she was, but she was already guiding me away from the desk, leading me down a side hallway. Her grip was assertive and urgent. I could have resisted, or maybe I should have, but I was drawn in by her urgency. We stopped at a small supply closet, and she opened the door, motioning for me to step inside. It was cramped, with shelves packed full of linens and supplies. She positioned me near the door, keeping it ajar, and put a finger to her lips. "Stay quiet," she whispered in my ear. "Your daughter? She's fine." Her words confused me, and I moved to speak, but she squeezed my shoulder, signaling for me to hold off. Then she indicated I should watch through the crack in the door. The hallway outside was still, the harsh lights illuminating everything. I could hear my own breaths and feel how tense Vera was beside me. Then footsteps approached from the right. My daughter walked by, not limping, not injured. She appeared perfectly fine. She moved with that familiar, strong stride of hers. Beside her was a man in a white coat, looking a bit uneasy, likely a doctor. They stopped not far from our hiding spot. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Vera kept her hand steadying me. "Want me to tell him? Spinal injuries, $85,000 for surgery," the doctor said, sounding hesitant. My daughter responded, calm, without a hint of distress. "His insurance won't cover it. He'll have to pay out of pocket. I'll give you $3,000 to help out." My hands balled into fists. The shelves were digging into my back, but I held myself together, silent. My years in the courtroom had taught me to keep my composure. "This is really not normal," another voice piped up, a voice I recognized all too well. Luther appeared from a doorway, that smug smile plastered on his face that I'd gotten used to seeing at my breakfast table for the past 2 years. "The old man will give it all up to save his daughter," he chortled, sure of himself. "Trust me, he's good for it." The doctor looked a bit uncomfortable but nodded. They threw around details about how I'd be told the diagnosis, how dire they'd make it sound, and how I'd be instructed to send the money. My daughter spoke with a steady, unemotional tone, like she was just listing groceries. Then they moved off, heading back towards the main lobby. Their footsteps echoed and then faded, leaving a heavy silence behind them in the hallway. Vera released my shoulder and stepped back. I looked her in the eye and truly saw her. A woman exhausted from a long shift, weariness etched around her eyes, but standing tall with a sincere integrity. You can't just pretend. Softly, she said, "I overheard them setting this up in an empty patient room about an hour ago. I tried to get to you before you came, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm really sorry it had to end up like this." Realizing my voice was working perfectly, I kept it calm and cold as I spoke. "No need to say sorry. You've actually helped me out." We stepped out of the closet into the hallway, which was now empty except for the harsh lighting, the sterile smell, and the faint sounds of machines. I reached my hand out, and she shook it. "Would you testify to what you've heard if necessary?" I asked, just in case it came to that. She met my gaze directly and nodded firmly. "Yes," she said, with not an ounce of hesitation. I thanked her and asked for her contact info. She jotted it down on a little piece of paper from her pocket, her handwriting clear and confident. Then I made my way to the exit, walking carefully, not in a rush or like I was fleeing, just with purpose. Outside, the parking lot was lit up by a dawn that painted the mountains on the city's outskirts in pink and gold. I spotted my car in the same haphazard position I'd left it, a bit crooked over the lines. Once inside, I locked the doors and took a moment, clenching the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Rage felt alive inside me, clawing at my insides. I let it rise to the surface, let it peak, then forced it back down, locking it away. Emotion only muddled things. It made you reckless. I watched as the sun climbed higher, its light turning the hood of my car a coppery color. My daughter, my only child, had tried to pull a fast one, scamming me out of $85,000 with a bogus medical emergency. And Luther, who'd cozied up in my house like he owned it, was ecstatic about it too. They thought I was weak, over the hill, an easy mark. How wrong they were. My 3 decades as a federal judge had taught me a lot: how to read people, build airtight cases, and deliver precise judgments. Most importantly, I learned that the best kind of revenge isn't rushed or driven by anger. It's cold, calculated, and leaves a lasting impact. I turned the key, the engine humming smoothly, and knew I had things to do, plans to craft. But my first stop had to be home. They'd expect me to return frazzled, eager to hear about my daughter's alleged injuries and ready to cut a check on the spot. Let them think they had everything under control. I left the parking lot, heading east, sticking to the speed limit. Morning traffic was starting to build as Phoenix stirred to life with people off to work, hitting coffee shops and running their usual Saturday errands. My Saturday, though, was shaping up to be far from usual. I was set on dismantling my daughter's ploy. The following day, I was back at Phoenix Memorial. Traffic crawled along Central Avenue, giving me time to practice in the rearview mirror, a concerned dad, an old guy unsure about things, ready to lend a hand. These expressions felt unfamiliar on my face, but they were necessary. I parked where panic had driven me before. This time, my grip on the wheel was steady. I'd spent the day before deep in thought, turning shock into something I could act on. Now it was time to play my part. Dr. Graham met me in a consultation room by the ICU, an average guy with some gray at his temples, the type of face that didn't stick in your memory. He gestured for me to sit, and I leaned in, pretending to search for some hope. He clipped some images onto the light board, apparently an MRI of my daughter's spine. Years of looking into medical malpractice cases had given me the eye to spot legit spinal injuries. These were generic images, probably lifted straight from a textbook for students, and not very clear either. "Mr. Perez," Dr. Graham said, his voice dripping with practiced seriousness, "your daughter's got serious spinal compression at C5, C6. We need to get her into surgery right away, or she could end up paralyzed." I blinked slowly, letting fake confusion show. "But the accident? How?" I asked. "The impact displaced her vertebrae," he explained, far too smoothly. "We need to operate in the next 72 hours and the bill is $85,000. Insurance says it's elective stabilization." I let my hands shake a bit on the chair's arms. 85 grand. That's all I've got saved, I muttered. Graham's neutral look barely hid a glimmer of satisfaction. He was probably calculating his cut. He guided me down the hall to her room. My daughter was there, propped up with pillows, a neck brace strapped on. She was lounging in bed with a neck brace barely doing its job, as if it was a prop for a pretend play. Her face was all about soldiering through the pain, but I noticed that tiny glimmer of mischief, the sneaky little grin she couldn't hide whenever she thought my attention was elsewhere. "Dad," she whispered, her voice just a whisper, "don't stress about the cash, I'll manage." I stepped closer, reaching for her hand. She flinched at first, a subconscious move, but then allowed me to grasp it. The neck brace was all smoke and mirrors, not necessity, and the piles of pillows were there for comfort, not doctor's orders. It was all staged. "Don't say that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady for effect. "You're my kid. I'll sort out the money." Her eyes glistened, true tears now, but not sadness, more like excitement. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." I took a breath, fighting back tears of my own. "You're all I got now." The door creaked open, and in strolled Luther, looking deeply concerned. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a weight I wanted to shake off. "Jesse, we'll figure this out," he promised, words kind, but eyes calculating his gain. "You've got some equity in your house, right? You could take a loan to cover expenses." "A loan," I repeated, uncertainty washing over my words. "At my age, that's just a short-term solution." Luther tightened his grip on my shoulder. "Once she's back on her feet, she can work again," he proposed. "We'll help you pay it back." It was an obvious fabrication to me, but he was blind to it. "I'll visit the bank," I murmured. Then Dr. Graham entered with a pile of documents, release forms, the whole shebang. My hand trembled as I signed each one deliberately, making a show of it. I clumsily handled the pen and fumbled with my glasses, overdoing it on purpose. As I exited, I turned back. 2 days. I'll have it in 2 days." Graham agreed solemnly. "Time is precious, Mr. Perez." I nodded. "I understand. I won't let her down." As I walked the corridor, I passed the nurse's desk. Vera Turner shot me a knowing glance, instilling a bit of courage in me. I wasn't alone. Someone else had a clear view of what was really going on. When I hit the exit, voices carried from her room. They assumed I was out of earshot. Luther's chuckle softly resonated. "Told you it'd work. He's completely hooked." I missed most of May's response, just catching her cautioning him to stay quiet. "We're good once the cash rolls in. Stay cool." I was seated in my car, not starting it, allowing my facade to crumble. Looking in the rearview mirror, I faced the true me, sharp, scheming, and determined. I picked up the phone to dial. "Roberts and Associates, how can I assist you?" came the receptionist's voice. "I need a consultation with Wallace Roberts. Estate planning, preferably today." "One moment, please," she replied. Eyeing the hospital entrance, plans formed in my mind. They wanted my money, but I was intent on safeguarding my assets from their greedy hands. "Mr. Roberts can meet you at 4 this afternoon." "Great," I answered, leaving the parking lot. I had 2 days on the clock. That translated to 48 hours to shore myself up. They weren't ready for what I had planned. Roberts and Associates occupied office space above a brick building downtown. I arrived promptly at 4 and was swiftly shown into Wallace Roberts' office. He was younger than I expected, in his mid-40s, dressed smartly, and no wedding ring. Good. He wouldn't bring personal baggage into this. "Mr. Perez," he greeted, offering his hand and gesturing for me to sit. "You mentioned estate planning." I chose him from the Bar Association's directory intentionally. No ties meant no challenging questions about sudden changes. "I want to rewrite my will, as soon as possible." "I see," Roberts nodded calmly. Lawyers in his field rarely pried. "Do you have your current will with you?" I handed it over, watching as he reviewed it with practiced speed. His expression stayed neutral, but I could see him mentally noting things down. Figures in black and white laid bare, the house valued at $580,000, savings at $240,000, and varied investments, all initially meant for my daughter. But what adjustments did I plan? The house, for starters, would now be directed towards the Judicial Veterans Assistance Fund, a commendable charity aiding retired court employees. I verified their trustworthiness that very morning. So, my plan for my daughter was to leave her $50,000, and that was going to be the end of it. Robert, who was helping me out, just kept jotting down notes, and he was pretty subtle about it. Didn't pry, just gave a slight nod. He told me he'd whip up the new draft and said we could get it witnessed and officially filed with the county records office today, which was exactly what I wanted. He was on it for about an hour and a half while I sat there, making sure everything was buttoned up legal-wise and the charity stuff was on point. When he finally handed me the document, it was airtight, not a single loophole in sight. I went over it twice before I signed it, and 2 paralegals were there as witnesses. Robert reassured me that it would be filed that day, but until it was properly recorded, the old will was still in effect. He said everything should be squared away by the day's end. I ended up paying him with a check for $1,800, which was less than what I'd expected. After leaving Robert's office, I made my way to a bank, not the one I had been using for 3 decades, since that would raise some eyebrows. Instead, I chose a smaller branch way across town where I was just another face in the crowd. I told the manager I needed to set up a new savings account and shift some cash from my main account somewhere else. She stayed all businesslike, even as my account info popped up on her screen. "How much would you like to transfer, Mr. Perez?" she asked. $150,000, I said. She completed the transaction without a peep. The new account was set up in the system, flying under the radar, away from anyone checking out my primary account. My main account now showed just over $90,000, plenty to cover any made-up surgery plans and a little more. Just in case someone got curious, and I had a feeling they might, they'd see there were funds available without knowing my real net worth. "You'll receive confirmation in about 5 business days," she assured me. I thanked her and walked out. There was one last stop. The private investigation firm was nestled near the airport, blending in with other professional offices in the area. The investigator who met me must have been in her 50s, hair going gray and pulled back, her eyes telling the story of someone who has seen it all and isn't surprised by much anymore. "What kind of info are you looking for, Mr. Perez?" she asked. "I'm after background on Luther Roberts. Job history, financial activities, anything public record," I said, keeping my tone steady. "He's my son-in-law, thinking of getting into a family business with him, so I need to do my homework." It was a plausible enough story, and she didn't press for more. "I can get you a detailed report in a week. The standard fee is $2,500. I handed her cash as the retainer. She gave me a receipt and her business card. "I'll call when it's ready." Driving home, it felt like every piece was finally sliding into its rightful place. The will was updated and filed, my finances were secured and hidden, and the background check was underway. They thought they were taking advantage of a fragile old man, completely unaware they were walking into a trap I'd set up with precision. The days dragged on painfully slow. I mostly stayed home, acting out grief. My daughter called twice, checking on the money. I said it was in the works, that the bank had their process. I put a convincing tremor in my voice. She bought it, hook, line, and sinker. By the 6th day, the investigator got in touch. "The report's ready, Mr. Perez. Would you like to swing by and pick it up, or should I mail it?" "I'll come get it," I decided. The report was thorough, a solid 40 pages, and when I read it that night in my study, it was just as bad as I'd feared, and then some when it came to Luther. No real job for the last 4 years, dabbling in online gambling. Casino records showed he'd blown $45,000 over 3 years. This directly added up to all the money I had forwarded to him for supposed business efforts, health stuff, and investments. Every bit of it wasted on gambling tables and sports bets. But that wasn't all. Fraud charges in Nevada, dodged on a technicality. A restraining order from an ex-girlfriend. A trail of financial trickery spanning a decade. 45 grand. The amount I handed over, thinking it was going to improve, save, or create something. Vanished, while Luther chuckled and my daughter came back asking for more. And now, they were after another $85,000. I set the report down. I had everything locked down just right, my brand new will, those bank statements, all safely tucked away in the safe. Everything was in place. The house was secure, most of my savings were hidden, and I had all the evidence I needed. Vera Turner was primed to testify. The investigators' reports were carefully stored. They might have thought they had me cornered, but boy, were they in for a surprise. Tomorrow I'd march back into that hospital, armed with their cash, and set the wheels of their downfall in motion. Jump ahead a week, and there I was in my bedroom, clutching a cashier's check for $85,000. It felt heavier than paper had any right to, loaded with meaning. I snapped pictures from 3 different angles, proof of payment, evidence of their sleaze. Then, I slipped it into my jacket pocket. The reflection in the mirror showed exactly what I wanted them to see. A rumpled shirt, an unshaved face, fatigue lining my eyes. This role was rehearsed, each detail meticulously planned. The performance had to be spot on. Phoenix Memorial looked just the same as during that first frantic visit. But now I was more composed, my shoulders slightly drooped as if carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Dr. Graham was there waiting for me in the room, still sporting that ridiculous neck brace that wasn't aligned for any real injury. Her eyes tracked me, unable to hide a flicker of anticipation. I made my voice sound tired, resigned. "The bank processed it yesterday," I told her. Graham examined the check with false seriousness. A nurse hovered at the doorway, another witness to the transaction, another piece of the puzzle snapping into place. "Mr. Perez, you're giving your daughter another shot at life," Graham said, irony stinging my tongue. "She's all I've got." My daughter's hand reached for mine. Her fingers were cold, insincere. "Dad, I don't know how I'll ever thank you." "Just get better," I said. "That's all that matters." Luther was by the window, trying hard to hide his satisfaction. I could almost hear his mental calculations, figuring out how he'd spend the money he thought he'd successfully conned out of me. At her bedside, I allowed myself to hug her. She stiffened in my arms, unfamiliar with genuine warmth, even as she pretended to be grateful. Over her shoulder, I saw Luther, acting like he already owned this place, planning how to squander what he thought would soon be his. "I met with my attorney last week," I mentioned casually. "Updated my will. Wanted to make sure you're covered. All of it, the house, the savings. It's yours when I'm gone." Her response was fast. "Dad, don't say things like that. You'll be around for years." But her eyes gleamed. Luther sauntered over smoothly. "Still, it's good to have things settled. Shows you care about the family." "Family," the word left a sour taste. "Family is everything." Graham assured me the surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. He'd keep me updated. I nodded, playing the part of the weary father, and left. I knew the second I was out the door, that check would be in the bank. Once the fraud investigation caught up, the trail of evidence would be undeniable. 2 days later, Graham rang me up. "Great news. The swelling has gone down a lot. Surgery's not needed after all." "Thank goodness," I replied, acting relieved. "So, the $85,000? How does the hospital handle that?" "Through insurance adjustments," he smoothly lied. "Complicated process, but you'll get most of it back." Just another lie, another piece of their collapse. "Well, as long as my daughter is healthy," I said. That night, they came over. My daughter moved without any trace of an injury. Dr. Graham's neck brace was missing, left behind at the hospital. They made dinner, a rare gesture, a calculated show of kindness. The pot roast scent wafted through the air, bringing back memories of better days, times when family wasn't predatory. "Dad, sit down," my daughter chimed, overly cheerful. "We're making your favorite." "You didn't have to go all out," I said, watching Luther casually help himself to my top-shelf wine. the ones I'd been saving for a special occasion. "It's the least we could do for everything you've done for us," he replied, making himself right at home in my kitchen. My daughter subtly rearranged the furniture, leaving her mark, while Luther rummaged through drawers as if he were taking inventory for an estate sale. "I'm just relieved you're all right," my daughter whispered, pulling me in for a hug. "Thanks for saving her life," they said, a lie wrapped in fake gratitude. I played along, hugging them back, but inside I was counting the hours until their real intentions showed. That night, I lay in bed, the thin wall between us deliberately chosen so I could hear everything. My phone was on the nightstand, silently recording our conversation. Their voices carried through clearly, like they didn't give a second thought to being overheard. 85 grand just like that. Luther's voice came through, full of excitement. "Once the old man kicks it, everything's ours. The house alone must be worth 580 grand, plus whatever he's squirreled away in savings. Might take a while, though. He's in good shape for his age." Then his tone shifted darkly. "Maybe it's time we kickstart this process. That senior home, Sunny Vista, right? We get him legally declared incompetent, and then we have control over everything." There was a pause, followed by my voice, teetering but agreeing. "Or things happen. Older folks fall all the time." Luther had the nerve to chuckle. "Now you're on to something. Either way, come summer, this place is ours," he said. Lying in the shadows, everything inside me twisted. They'd gone too far. This wasn't just about robbing me. They were plotting to hurt me, to finish me off or lock me away. My own daughter, and the opportunist she'd chosen to bring into our lives, plotting my end as if it were just another errand on their list. I let the recording run until their scheming turned to snores. Then I saved the file, encrypting it and backing it up in multiple places. Real proof. Truth. They thought they had it all planned out, but they didn't realize the tables had turned. The pressure started to mount over the next few days. Just 3 days after their scheming, I spotted a brochure for Sunny Vista on the kitchen counter. It had cheerful photos of smiling seniors, promising spacious rooms and full care, calculated yet subtle. Throughout the week, more brochures appeared strategically, on the coffee table, by my reading nook, tucked in with the daily newspaper. Each highlighted something different. Memory care, assisted living, comprehensive medical attention. The message was loud and clear. By Tuesday's breakfast, she brought it up, pretending to be concerned. "Dad, the house seems like it's becoming too much with the yard work, repairs and stairs," she suggested, with an air of false sympathy. I feigned confusion, glancing up from my coffee. "I've been keeping up for 30 years, I reminded her. "But you're not getting any younger," Luther chimed in with patronizing concern. "Imagine if something happened, when you're alone here most of the time." "I'm not alone since you both are here," I countered softly. Luther leaned in, elbows on my table, intruding into my space. "We can't be around every second. What if you fell or left the stove on?" he posed, letting the veiled threat hang there. I let my hands shake a little around the mug, playing along. "Been feeling a bit off? Maybe we can chat about this later?" I suggested, noting the subtle nods of approval they traded. They thought they were seeing me crack. My daughter reached over, patting my hand. "We just want the best for you, Dad." That afternoon, with both of them out and about, Luther supposedly off to some job, I set up a meet with the private investigator at a coffee shop downtown, well out of their likely watchful eyes. She slid a thicker envelope my way than before. "Your son-in-law's caught in a mountain of debt," she said quietly. "He's in $18,000 deep to a guy named Rodrigo Sanchez. Unregulated gambling debts. They want it cleared by the end of May." Flipping through, I saw text messages and a betting record, all filled with threats that grew nastier by the day. "How bad is it?" I asked. "They're talking consequences," she replied, "and they don't settle things in court." She hesitated, then added, "But that's not all. Your daughter made a move to seize control of your bank accounts 2 weeks ago." The news made me freeze as my coffee went untouched and cold. The bank contacted you for a confirmation. When you said it wasn't you, they flagged it. Here are the fake documents, she said, handing them over to me. Your signature, copied perfectly, and papers that would give them total control over your money. She signed it. He fraudulently notarized it. He'd been acting like he was losing his memory on purpose. Things were getting serious. The investigator cautioned, "Whatever your plan is, you need to act fast." Slipping her another $500, I took the envelope and headed back home. In my study, I added the new evidence to my growing pile. By then, I'd filled 2 accordion folders with proof: faked hospital bills, gambling debt, forged documents, and threatening messages. Everything was carefully marked, dated, and easy to cross-check. Yet, I still held off on acting. I needed them to go all in so they couldn't backtrack. So, I continued with the act of the forgetful old man. During breakfast, I'd ask something simple like, "Mimi, what day is it today?" "Tuesday, Dad." "April 8th, she'd answer, and I'd pretend to get lost in my own thoughts. "Oh, never mind." The way they looked at each other was full of smug satisfaction. Luther could hardly conceal his excitement. "You've been more forgetful, Jesse. Maybe a doctor's visit would be wise." The doctor's visit. They'd set it all up without my input. An appointment at the Senior Assessment Center for Thursday at 10 a.m. They called it a diagnostic check, the first step in questioning my competency. I turned them down softly, feigning weakness instead of defiance. "I'll consider it," I'd say. She'd act concerned, though you could see her irritation. "Dad, your health is important." "I will, I promise." Though I had zero plans of showing up. The assessment was genuine, done by real doctors. No way my performance would hold up under their scrutiny. As the days of April ticked by, Luther got more pushy. Every staged, absent-minded act, like misplacing my wallet in plain sight only to later search for it, or asking if I'd eaten lunch when they knew I had, seemed to trigger more contempt. "This is getting out of hand," Luther huffed, barely holding in his temper. "You can't even remember where you put your wallet." "Sorry," I'd mumble, sounding unsure. "I thought He'd lean in, all height and intimidation. "You're becoming a hassle. What's next? Leaving a door unlocked? Wandering off?" They'd soothe him gently. "Luther, don't be so harsh." But they'd also say, "But Dad, he has a point. Maybe a supervised living facility would be safer." Safer for them. A place where I'd be alone, medicated, controlled, where accidents could happen without witnesses, where deaths didn't raise eyebrows. One night, I sat at my desk, meticulously organizing the evidence files on my computer, folder after folder, all clearly tagged. Fake hospital bills, gambling debts, forgery, threats, banking records. Everything was saved, encrypted, locked away securely. Luther's bookmaker deadline was approaching in just 6 weeks. They were running out of road, and desperation tends to make people sloppy. I've seen it so many times in court. The careful ones slip up and make grave mistakes when pressure builds. I just needed to keep my act alive a bit more. Let them believe they're winning. Let them dig in so deep with choices they couldn't reverse. The setup wasn't quite there yet, but it was close. Mid-April came under the clear Arizona skies, tinged with the weight of choices taken. I drove to Wallace Roberts' office, carrying a leather folder filled with months of collected evidence. Everything was lined up like a detective's dream: statements from witnesses, stacks of financial records, and typed-up recordings. After spending 3 decades on the judge's bench, I've learned that being ready beats being fiery in court. Wallace met me in the conference room, coffee waiting hot. I spread out the documents systematically. He looked through every piece, taking notes, shooting me questions now and then. The scheme was all about medical fraud, conspiracy, wrong diagnoses for money. He pointed to the PI's findings. "And you've got a witness who'll testify under oath?" "Vera Turner," She'll be here soon." He skimmed through her statement, then gave me that look of respect. "With this evidence, we can hit them with civil and criminal charges. The bank should freeze any movement right away." "Let's do it. All of it." Wallace put down his pen and looked at me. "This will hit hard on your daughter and son-in-law." I locked eyes with him, steady. They've got themselves to blame. Vera turned up about 40 minutes later. She seemed a bit jittery but was standing tall, clearly pushing past her fear. I got up to welcome her and shook her hand. "Thanks for coming." "It's the right thing to do," she replied simply, as Wallace got her ready for what's next. She handled the deposition like a veteran, calm and steady. Her voice was unwavering as she relived a morning in February. It was just the three of them in the patient room, plotting for $85,000. When asked if she was sure of what she heard, she didn't hesitate. Absolutely certain, she said Dr. Graham was promised $3,000 for his part. She noted the time, 6:45 a.m. Signing her affidavit felt momentous. The evidence went from mere paper to solid testimony that could withstand grilling. In Wallace's office, I dialed my bank's fraud department and put it on speaker. "Mr. Perez, can you detail the fraud claim?" the voice asked. I laid it all out directly. A phony medical emergency, a bogus diagnosis, unneeded surgery, and $85,000 snuck out through lies. Wallace nodded along as I explained the legal angle. "We'll freeze the transaction and investigate," assured the fraud manager. I hung up and exchanged a look with Wallace. The first domino had toppled. "They'll find out soon," Wallace commented. "The hospital will notice the freeze." "Perfect. Let them sweat." As I navigated the afternoon traffic, I savored a sense of justice, not joy, just making things right. Back at home, I settled in my study with legal papers, plotting an article to keep up appearances, but I left the door a crack open, listening. Around 4, my phone buzzed. Her voice was panicked. "Frozen? The bank can't just... What did he do?" Luther's voice chimed in, simmering with control. "That old man's meddling again. We need to shut this down now." Their footsteps thudded loudly towards my study. They didn't bother knocking. "Dad," Mimi's voice shook. "What have you done? The hospital's involved. They're digging into everything." "There's nothing to find if nothing's wrong," I mused, keeping my face calm. "With nothing real, there's no reason to fret." Luther loomed closer, trying to use his height as a threat. "Reporting your own daughter? What kind of father does that?" "One who can spot a scam from a mile away." I snapped back. His face darkened. "You're making a big mistake, old man." I set my pen down and returned his stare. "The court will decide who's right here." My daughter's voice trembled with anger. "This is because you never loved me. You want me to hurt because I cut her off." I replied, cool and direct. "I gave you everything. Money, a refuge when you needed it, trust you didn't always deserve. You're being heartless." "No, I'm being just." Luther edged closer again, aggression barely contained. "You think you're clever, with your lawsuits and fake lawyering? You'll want to take this back." "Are you threatening me? My lawyer might want to hear that." He drew back, recalibrating his strategy. "Not a threat, just laying out facts. You tried to con $85,000 out of me." Nothing else seemed significant anymore. They left quietly, and soon their room was filled with shouting, accusations flying around as panic set in. Earlier, Dr. Graham had given me a call, which Wallace later brought up. The doctor was livid, threatening to reveal everything unless he got his money. They were trapped, which is exactly where they needed to find themselves. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my private investigator. There were new threats from a bookie, with some hints about potential physical harm. They set the deadline for May 30th. The folks involved were in way too deep. I sent it over to Wallace with a simple instruction: log it. Then, in the stillness of the house, I made sure to record the message in my files. Luther had roughly 6 weeks to gather $18,000, with pressure piling up and no real options in sight. Desperation leads people to do reckless things. Believe me, I've seen it happen time and time again. That was the exact outcome I was hoping for. Those 6 weeks passed steadily. When Wallace phoned me on a Tuesday morning at the end of May, there was something almost like satisfaction in his voice. "The court ruled in your favor. Dr. Graham's medical license is suspended during the investigation. Phoenix Memorial returned the $85,000 and added another $15,000 to cover. The penalties were being sorted out, and the money was expected to reach my bank account in about 3 days. I thanked him and hung up, then plopped down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Soon, I'd be receiving a hefty $100,000, my home was secure, and everything was finally going as planned. Through the kitchen door, I could see my daughter and Luther in the living room. Since the court ruling, they hadn't put their phones down, speaking in hushed, urgent voices. Luther was facing a bookie's deadline only 8 days away. They had no money, no future plans, and were staring down serious criminal charges. For weeks, I had watched them slowly fall apart, arguments that stretched late into the night, and Luther disappearing for long stretches only to come back empty-handed. And my daughter? I'd hear her crying in the guest room, the harsh truth sinking in that her dad wasn't going to bail her out this time. That afternoon, Linda Chen, the notary I had worked with back in March to sort out my property title, gave me a call. "Mr. Perez, someone tried to sell your property today using your information. He pretended to be you and had some papers claiming the house was his." My hand tightened around the phone. "What did you tell him?" I reminded him, based on our March arrangement, you need to be there in person for any property transactions. When I asked for ID, he got tense and took off. "I'm calling the police because those documents seemed fake." "Please do that. I'll head over to your office right now." With that, I grabbed my car keys. In the living room, Luther's jacket was slung over a chair. I checked the pockets. Nothing. But his laptop bag was on the couch. Inside, I found printed documents for a title transfer with my forged signature and a fake ID where my photo had been swapped with Luther's. Clearly, he had been planning this for a while, desperate enough to risk a felony for forgery. I left everything behind and drove to Linda's office. She had already alerted the police. I met with a detective there, shared my account, and he photographed the legitimate documents I had filed earlier in March. "The suspect might return," the detective noted. "We'll keep officers on watch." I reassured them. "He'll be back. He doesn't have many options left." I waited in my car across the street, and sure enough, about an hour and a half later, Luther's sedan pulled into the parking lot. He walked into Linda's office with this forced confidence, the same cocky attitude he'd shown in my kitchen when he thought he had me cornered. Then, 2 officers stepped out of an unmarked car and followed him inside. From my spot, I watched through the window as Luther's expression changed, from confusion to realization, and finally, to pure panic. When he tried to make a run for it, the officers blocked the door. Compared to the fierce anger in his eyes, the handcuffs seemed almost gentle. They escorted him out, reading him his rights before they placed him in the back of the patrol car. That's when Luther finally noticed me sitting in my car across the street. His face twisted with rage, but whatever he wanted to shout was trapped behind the closing car door. As the patrol car left, I drove home with a sense of calm. When I walked back in, I saw my daughter, pacing back and forth in the kitchen with her phone practically glued to her ear. "They won't hold him without bail." "What do you mean $25,000? "We don't have that kind of money," she said, sounding frantic. The moment she saw me, she quickly hung up. Her face was pale and streaked with tears. "Luther's been arrested. He tried selling your house," she told me. "Yeah, I know," I said. She stopped in her tracks, processing my words. "You knew?" she realized, her eyes widening. "You set this up with the notary, didn't you?" I replied. "I took precautions back in March to safeguard the house. Luther decided to forge the papers today." She was upset. He was desperate, and you pushed him to it. I calmly put my keys down on the counter and met her gaze. He tried to sell my house without even telling me. That's not desperation. That's stealing. Bail's $25,000. Her voice shook. The bookmaker. If Luther doesn't pay by Friday, they'll come after him, or worse. She begged, "You have to help him." "I don't owe him anything," I replied. "But he's your son-in-law, and I'm your daughter. How can you just stand there and—" She cried, more tears sliding down her cheeks. I spoke to her in a calm but firm tone. "You tried to scam me out of $85,000 with a fake medical story. You tried to hack into my bank accounts. And just now, Luther attempted to sell my house with bogus documents. You both made your choices." Her pleas grew more frantic. "Please, I'm begging you." "You should have thought this through before deciding to commit fraud," I said coolly. "You're on your own now." With that, I headed into my study and shut the door. Her sobs echoed in the kitchen, but inside me, there was only a sense of cold satisfaction as everything unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. A text lit up my phone from Wallace. "Police called. Luther's been charged with forgery and attempted fraud. Both are serious charges. No bail for now, trial in 6 weeks." I gave a straightforward reply. "Document everything." As night fell, the house grew quiet. My daughter left, though I neither knew nor cared where she went. Luther was locked up. My money was returning, and the house remained mine. For 3 decades, I'd worked within the legal system, and I saw it doing its job. Fraudsters got caught, evidence was gathered thoroughly, and justice was served. I didn't feel triumphant or gleeful, just a steady satisfaction watching consequences unfold like a well-planned equation. They assumed they were smarter, underestimated the lessons 3 decades on the federal bench taught me: preparation, evidence handling, and patience. It'd be a costly mistake for them. A couple of weeks passed, and I heard Luther made bail. For curiosity's sake, I checked out the bail bond records online. To my surprise, my name was listed as a guarantor. Digging deeper, with connections I still had, I found out $25,000 was borrowed from a lender infamous for a predatory 22% annual interest rate. Their initial payment alone would stretch them nearly $500 each month. They were drowning in debts, with no clear way out. On a Tuesday afternoon, Luther appeared at the house. From my study window, I watched him climb out of what used to be my car. His shoulders slumped, every step was heavy, like he was carrying a massive load. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the realization of the serious charges he faced: felony forgery and fraud. He didn't try to talk to me or plead his case. He just quietly slipped into the guest room. That night, I overheard him on the phone, voice low and urgent, begging for something. The words didn't matter. Desperation has a language all its own. Soon enough, those debt collection calls started coming in fast and furious. By the end of May, Luther found himself owing a hefty sum from gambling that had been sent over to an official agency, totally above board, but no less brutal. The calls came at all hours, day and night. Each day, more letters came, each one upping the threat level. The original debt of $18,000 wasn't just sitting there. It was growing, adding on fees and penalties, kind of like compound interest gone absolutely wild. I could hear Luther through the walls, desperately trying to spin stories for the collectors. He'd say things like, "I'll pay up. Just give me more time. I got legal stuff tying up my funds." But every excuse was weaker than the last, and those promises had no weight to them. Between the bail loan and that looming gambling debt, the sum was a shocking $43,000, with no clear way to dig out of the hole. My salary working at the medical office only brought in $35,000 a year, and Luther wasn't bringing in any bucks himself. Financially, we were sinking fast, and I was stuck just watching it unfold like a slow-motion car crash. One evening in early June, someone softly knocked on my study door. It was a gentle, almost hesitant knock. Not at all like the way she used to just walk right in. I'd been waiting for this moment ever since Luther got in trouble. I nodded for May to come in, and she did, carefully closing the door behind her as if even the slightest creak would be too much. She sat down across from me, like so many others had during my time listening to cases in court. Her eyes were red and puffy, evidence of tears. Her hands were wringing themselves together on her lap, like she was trying to squeeze out an invisible towel. She looked smaller, like she'd shrunk in on herself. "Dad." Her voice wobbled just on that single word. "I need to tell you everything. The whole hospital thing. It was bogus. All of it. The injury, the surgery, the cash. Luther, the doctor, and I cooked it all up." "I figured as much," I said. She was caught off guard, her mouth doing that fish thing while she blinked silently for a moment. "You knew? Then why didn't you?" "I wanted you to commit to your scheme fully. For evidence, actions have to be followed through on. Just having an intent isn't enough for a conviction." Her face twisted like she was ready to burst into flames. "I'm so sorry. I was foolish and greedy. Luther said we needed the money, that you had plenty to spare, and you wouldn't even miss it. He promised you'd never know it was gone." "Don't pin this on Luther. They were your choices. But you're 38, May. These decisions were yours. Luther didn't make you fake an injury or look me straight in the eye and lie when I held your hand. Those were decisions you made." She tried different tactics: tears, apologies, talking about the financial weight, the pressure from Luther's pile of debts, how terrified she felt. None of it got through to me. After 30 years of watching folks like this try every angle in court, I could see right through it. Sure, the tears were real, but the regret? Only a little bit came from the heart. She was sad about getting caught, not about what she'd done. "You've had countless chances to come clean," I pointed out, my tone calm but firm enough to make a point. "Every time I helped you, you had an opening to tell the truth." Rather than look at me with a scornful eye, gratitude would have gone a long way. During all the time you lived in this house, you could have chosen respect, but instead you'd gone for entitlement and deceit. I'm not perfect. Who is? Families are supposed to forgive, maybe even forgive me too. But forgiveness isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for what you've done. You committed fraud against me, your father, more than once. You treated the thought of my death like some payday. You attempted to steal what's mine. These aren't accidents. They're outright crimes. What's the plan now? Are you really just walking out on me, your only child? The question hovered in the air. I let it hang there, giving her a chance to feel how little it mattered after everything. "The moment you tried to con me out of $85,000 with made-up health problems, you threw away any claim to my support. And when you and Luther hatched plans to put me away or arrange an accident just to expedite your inheritance, you lost any remaining privilege." Her face paled. "You overheard that?" I caught every word. I reached into my desk drawer, pulling out 2 documents. The first one, an eviction notice dated June 5th, followed every county policy to a T, and I handed it to her. My lawyer made sure it adhered strictly to Arizona's landlord-tenant laws. "You have 30 days to relocate. This is filed with the county and it's legally binding." Luther appeared at the doorway, likely drawn by my raised voice. He looked disheveled, unshaven and worn out. "You're kicking us out? Your own flesh and blood? But you're not. You're a pair of swindlers who just happen to share my last name and currently live under my roof. And that's only for another 30 days. As May took in the eviction notice, her hands began to tremble. July 5th, officially stamped, signed by the county clerk. It's final. Where do you expect us to go? We've got nothing. Luther's debts, the loan, we're barely squeaking by. Well, that's a situation you created. You'll have to sort it yourselves. I revealed the second document, my updated will, properly notarized and recognized. Since you two are so keen on knowing my estate plans, here's the revised version, dated March 15th, well before all this blew up. Luther flipped through it quickly, panic crossing his face the more he read. His expression twisted with anger. A charity? You're leaving the house to charity? To the Judicial Veterans Assistance Fund, actually? They help retirees from the legal system, folks who upheld justice rather than threw it away. May traced her portion of the inheritance with her finger, as if wishing it would change. Only 50 grand? That's all? The house is worth nearly $600,000 for goodness sake. More than you deserve, to be honest. But I made that decision before realizing just how deep your treachery ran. If I could change it now, you'd get zilch. Luther snapped like a weak branch under pressure. You're destroying your daughter's life just out of spite. What kind of father does that? I'm not destroying anything. You did this to yourselves, and I refuse to bankroll your illusion of a life. May's eyes blazed as her voice rose. You're heartless. You never loved me. This is proof. A real father wouldn't turn his back. He'd forgive and help. Would that include financing your next scheme? Clearing Luther's gambling dues? Ignoring that you tried to fleece me for almost $100,000? Pretend you weren't discussing my downfall like it was just numbers on a spreadsheet? I looked at her and felt nothing, just a cold distance. The daughter I thought I knew and cherished was gone, if she ever existed at all. I loved the girl I believed you were. But the individual standing here now is someone who committed fraud, theft, and conspired against her own dad. That person must deal with the consequences, not receive affection. They stormed out of my office, Luther slamming the door so forcefully it rattled the frame. I could hear them arguing in their room, paying no heed to the walls they disregarded as boundaries. May was sobbing, Luther throwing curses. Something crashed. Maybe a lamp or a phone hurled against the wall. Debt collectors called twice more that night. I heard Luther yelling into his phone, followed by quiet, then the resigned sound of defeat. His car would be gone within the week. He'd used it as collateral, I knew. Switching out the collateral for something else was another flop, much like all those other ideas that bit the dust before they could even get started. So, there I found myself, completely solo in my study. The eviction paperwork was already queued up in the system, and my will was safely tucked away. I turned my attention back to an article about preserving evidence in civil fraud cases I was reading in one of those legal mags. Justice, it turns out, isn't about emotions. It's about a sequence of steps that were ticking along like clockwork. In just 30 days, they'd have to clear out. A month, and this house would belong to me again. I put a red line through July 5th on my calendar, marking my day of freedom. By late July, the heat was relentless in Arizona, and Luther was gearing up for his big day in court. I settled a few rows back, observing him face the judge. Despite the AC blasting air, his neck was visibly sweaty, the collar of his shirt darker with dampness. My daughter sat in the front row, tense with anxiety. She didn't even glance my way when I arrived, acting oblivious to my presence. The judge, no nonsense and in her 50s with a steel-tinted hairdo, reviewed the file one last time before getting down to brass tacks. Her voice exuded authority, taking me back to my own days under those imposing robes. "Mr. Roberts," she started, "you've confessed to forgery and attempted fraud, both felonies in the fine state of Arizona." She'd pored over everything, even my victim impact statement. Luther remained still, standing beside his attorney, his hands clasped tightly behind him, knuckles whitened by the grip. The judge went on about how despicable it was, especially since he'd targeted a family member, an ex-federal judge no less, who had dedicated his career to upholding the very laws Luther had disrespected. He'd nearly swiped real estate worth over $500,000, all with some fake paperwork. Fortunately, a notary with sharp eyes caught him out. Adjusting her glasses, the judge read out his punishment: 18 months of supervised probation, a fine of $10,000 due in a year, and $5,000 in restitution to me, immediately. Plus, 200 hours of community service throughout his probation period. His criminal record would now be permanently marked. Luther gave a small nod, the will to fight seemingly quashed. No prior legal trouble meant he dodged prison time. Still, let's be frank, his old life was over. A felony conviction isn't something you can wash away. Employers, lenders, important folks, they'd all turn their backs. Plus, a 3-year restraining order meant he had to stay 500 feet away from me and my property, or risk jail. I slipped out before Luther left the defendant's spot. I didn't need to see or hear anything more from him. The court papers confirmed everything the judge decreed, set in stone. That was enough for me. Come July 5th, the eviction went smoothly, giving me the breathing room I'd planned for. I was at Wallace's office while they packed up, no need to watch their departure. Wallace checked in with me that afternoon. "Place is empty," he said. "They cleared their stuff, left the keys on the counter, no damage I can see. Change the locks when you're ready." I drove back through the scorching Phoenix sun to find the house empty. The guest room was barren, and inside the closet, just lonely hangers and dusty shelves. They'd left without a note, just the keys, a sad little pile on the kitchen counter. I chucked them into the trash, called in a cleaning team, and they got there in a couple of hours. 4 efficient workers scrubbed everything, erasing any hint of Luther, sprucing up the carpets, wiping down switches, counters, you name it. By day's end, the house smelled like a fresh start, ready for new beginnings. The next day, painters came in. I picked out colors that changed the whole vibe, with soft grays and warm whites, nothing like the previous tenants' choices. It felt like breathing new life into the place, one brush stroke at a time. Every wall they'd ever touched got a new coat of paint. With each roll of the brush, their traces were wiped away. I changed the guest room into an office and the bathroom into a storage space. It was like I was erasing their presence from my house with just this simple act of painting. By the 3rd day, I had new locks installed. A locksmith spent a couple of hours putting in fresh deadbolts, updating the security system, and programming a different garage remote. I got brand new keys and set new codes they didn't know. The house was now sealed up tight, keeping them permanently out. Mid-August rolled in, and there I was on my back patio, watching the Phoenix sun dip below the horizon. The monsoons made the sky explode in reds and golds as the day dimmed. The city sprawled beneath me, vast and indifferent. Millions of people carried on, unaware of the drama that had unfolded in my home. Inside, everything felt different, like the air was clearer, as if their departure had freed up space and silence. My phone buzzed, lighting up with Vera Turner's name. I saved her number from when she had testified months ago. "Mr. Perez, hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "Not at all, Vera. What's going on?" Turns out, after the investigation, the hospital introduced new policies. No single doctor could authorize big procedures without another's approval. They mandated multiple confirmations and independent verification for patients. That whole mess? It created ripples for positive change. It warmed my heart to hear it. "I'm relieved you said that. I didn't want anyone else caught in what I faced." "Absolutely," she said. She told me Dr. Graham's medical license was permanently revoked by the state. He wouldn't touch a medical practice again here. She thanked me for believing her that day, for acting on it. She knew not everyone would heed a stranger's warning. Giving that testimony wasn't small potatoes. Where others might ignore, I stepped up. But really, she deserved the thanks. We talked some more. Vera had been promoted to nursing supervisor and got recognition for her ethical stand. The hospital initiated a whistleblower program. Small wins, yes, but crucial ones that could spark lasting changes. After our call ended, I sat on the patio as night blanketed the valley. Financially, everything was back in place. The $85,000 from the scam, the $15,000 penalties from the hospital, and the $5,000 court restitution, all reimbursed. My estate stood strong, bulletproof, with a will updated in March. 50 grand awaited my heir down the line, not a penny more. This house was destined to help those fighting for justice, which felt right. Luther and his wife now lived in a modest 2-bedroom on the east side, $950 a month, not easy with her full-time job at a medical office. Their combined income hit about $66,000 a year. With rent, bail loan payments, debts, and living expenses, they barely scraped by. No savings, no safety net, a grim future. With Luther's felony record, legitimate job fields were off limits. He worked night shifts in a warehouse for minimum wage. His wife's job barely lifted them above poverty level. Every paycheck was stretched thin, sinking them in debt that'd take years to clear. The windfall they swapped their ethics for? Gone. The justice system played out as intended. Evidence was carefully collected and properly presented. Crimes were prosecuted through rightful channels. The court ordered restitution, which got fully paid. The civil consequences mirrored the criminal acts. The law stood firm because I knew how to play the game. I didn't break any laws and stayed true to my principles. No threats, no violence. I simply drew from 3 decades on the federal bench, documenting everything just right. Understanding how to gather evidence and build solid cases was something I was really good at. I became skilled at getting the guilty to fall into their own traps before they had to face the consequences. Some people might say I was behind their downfall, meticulously planning it all, but I saw it in another light. I simply stepped aside and let them deal with the outcomes of their bad choices. They were the architects of their own downfall, driven by greed, dishonesty, and malice. My job was to make sure there was no way out for them through lies. There I was, out on my porch, observing the sun dip below the horizon and stars start to twinkle in the sky, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a genuine sense of safety. No one plotting against me within my own home, no one pretending to care while secretly using my name, no one biding their time for me to pass so they could grab everything I worked for, just some well-earned peace and quiet. A home that felt truly mine once again, in all the ways that count. Over 67 years, I've constructed my life on a foundation of law, order, and honesty. My so-called family members tried to tear it down for some easy cash and their selfish goals. Their mistake was thinking I didn't know what a judge understands about evidence, verdicts, and patience. They mistook my age as a sign of fragility, my trust as naivety, and saw my love for my daughter as a weak spot. They were completely off the mark. It wasn't fast, it wasn't fierce, but the justice they faced was thorough and lasting. They'll be dealing with the legal consequences for years, financial chaos that might never clear up, and the harsh realization that their own foolishness led to their ruin. That was more than enough. I headed back inside, locked the door with a new key, and settled into my chair with a book I'd been wanting to read. I regained my home, the tranquility, and the life I'd always envisioned. While Phoenix hummed with its usual nightlife outside, I found solace knowing that justice was handled by someone who truly understood it, letting me find peace once and for all.